To embrace and acknowledge one's own shadow is a profound spiritual practice. It is an act of becoming whole, and thus sacred, marking one of the most significant experiences in a lifetime. Robert A. Johnson, an American author and Jungian analyst who followed the teachings of Carl Jung's analytical psychology, encountered a pivotal moment at the age of 11 when he faced a near-death experience in a car accident. Transported to the hospital, he found himself engulfed in a void, a profound darkness that paradoxically revealed glimpses of an ecstatic world, where everything shone with a golden hue. Upon being revived and the vision ceasing, Johnson was overwhelmed with despair at the thought of returning to life. However, through therapy, he came to understand the preciousness of human existence and the treasures it offered. Throughout his life, Johnson grappled with the challenges of the outer world, often feeling like an innocent fool akin to Parsifal, navigating the thin line between life and death on multiple occasions. It was his exploration of the inner realms that provided him with solace and understanding. His encounter with Jung proved instrumental, as the renowned psychologist advised him to prioritize solitary introspection, emphasizing the importance of inner work over external achievements. Jung assured him that the unconscious would provide all necessary guidance and resources for his journey, highlighting the significance of contributing to the collective evolution of consciousness. At the age of 54, feeling adrift in his existence, Johnson embarked on a solo journey to India. Despite the challenges and setbacks, including the loss of his luggage, he experienced a profound awakening while gazing out of his hotel window, witnessing the world aglow with the same golden brilliance he had glimpsed decades earlier. This revelation offered him a renewed sense of purpose and a second chance at life. Johnson's story teaches us to trust in the inner world, which holds the key to our well-being and fulfillment. The golden world, symbolizing spiritual enlightenment and inner peace, is not a distant realm to be attained through external efforts but rather a state of consciousness accessible to all, irrespective of time or place. As Johnson emphasized in his works, including Owning Your Own Shadow, Understanding the Dark Side of the Psyche, the true source of fulfillment lies within, waiting to be discovered and embraced. In our modern era, the quest for fulfillment and meaning is not found in the external trappings of life but rather in the depths of our own souls. Exploring our inner world stands as the paramount task of our existence. To achieve this, one must transcend the ego, delving into the realm of the shadow. Robert A. Johnson elucidates Jung's early conception of the shadow, defining it as the aspect of ourselves obscured from conscious awareness, residing within the depths of the unconscious. However, numerous misconceptions shroud the concept of the shadow, often portraying it as malevolent, dark, and worthy of avoidance. Yet, this portrayal is misguided. The shadow is not an external entity or the embodiment of evil, but an integral part of one's being. It cannot and should not be evaded, for to do so would mean turning against oneself. Each of us carries a shadow, metaphorically trailing behind us, mirroring the aspects of our personality that elude our conscious gaze. It serves a compensatory function, endeavoring to restore the wholeness of our character. For example, the shadow of a criminal may encompass virtues such as sincerity, empathy, and tenderness, contrasting with their overt actions. Similarly, the shadow of a reserved individual might encompass traits like assertiveness, commitment, and accountability. When we selectively present only the favorable aspects of ourselves while repressing our true emotions and feelings to conform to societal expectations or avoid conflict, we inadvertently fuel resentment that is directed towards the shadow and projected onto others unconsciously. It is imperative to acknowledge our capacity for both good and evil, for this duality constitutes the essence of our being. To deny the existence of darkness is to deny a fundamental aspect of ourselves. Thus, as we strive for a life characterized by virtue, peace, and joy, we must recognize the shadow not as an adversary but as an ally. Within its depths lie treasures of pure gold awaiting integration into our personality. However, when ignored or misunderstood, the shadow can become hostile, exerting control over us as we resist acknowledgement. We are faced with a choice: to be guided by our shadow or to be dragged through life by it, succumbing to neurotic tendencies. True holiness does not stem from purity alone but emerges from the synthesis of both light and darkness, leading to transcendent growth. So, how does the shadow come into existence? Our rejected and undesirable traits do not simply vanish. Instead, they gather in the obscure recesses of our personality, forming what is known as the shadow. Over time, if left unaddressed, the shadow accumulates energy until it surpasses the dominance of our ego, unleashing itself in the form of overwhelming rage. Jung once responded to a question about finding one's shadow by likening it to discovering the dragon that has consumed you. By definition, the shadow eludes conscious awareness, making it a challenging aspect to confront. When one can openly discuss their shadow, it ceases to remain hidden and becomes integrated into consciousness. Consequently, others may often perceive our shadow aspects before we do, presenting an uncomfortable truth. Despite being born as complete individuals, societal expectations compel us to suppress certain aspects of ourselves, leading to the division of the self into ego and shadow. This cultural conditioning stems from humanity's acquisition of knowledge of good and evil in the Garden of Eden, resulting in the fragmentation of the self. The shadow can be interpreted as sin, with the self representing the Christ figure. Cultural norms serve to homogenize individuals, relegating some of the pure gold of our personality into the shadow. Paradoxically, individuals tend to resist acknowledging the noble aspects of their shadow more vehemently than the darker facets. Ignoring the shadow equates to disregarding the inner gold within us. Often, individuals only recognize their latent potential when faced with severe illness or life-threatening situations, leading to profound personal insights. The archetype of the wounded healer epitomizes this journey, wherein one learns to heal oneself and extract wisdom from adversity. As we mature, our ego and shadow become clearly delineated, delineating a system of morality. The religious endeavor involves restoring the wholeness of the personality, symbolizing the union of fractured elements. In the modern age, many grapple with inner fragmentation, resisting the notion that there exists something greater than the ego. Robert Johnson illustrates our personality as a seesaw, with acceptable qualities on one side and unacceptable traits on the other. However, no quality can be discarded. Instead, they shift between the two sides of the seesaw. Maintaining psychic equilibrium requires balancing both sides, a truth often disregarded in favor of indulging in socially acceptable traits. The reciprocal nature of this phenomenon is equally significant. This instability often manifests as mood swings or sudden shifts in behavior, akin to assuming a completely different persona. Conversely, if the seesaw becomes excessively burdened, it risks breaking at its center point, resulting in psychosis or a mental breakdown. While we often take the equilibrium of bodily functions like body temperature for granted, we fail to recognize that the psyche also maintains its own balance. This concept finds depiction in a medieval manuscript portraying the tree of knowledge emerging from Adam's navel. On one side, the Virgin Mary, clad as a nun, distributes fruit from the tree to penitents for their salvation, while on the other side, Eve, naked, offers fruit to individuals for their damnation. Thus, the same tree yields dual outcomes: creativity and destruction. Although we aspire to embrace creativity without acknowledging destruction, such a scenario is untenable. Our aversion to this truth is profound. The prevailing inclination towards goodness or saintliness entails dwelling predominantly on the right-hand side, the virtuous side, of the seesaw. However, such an existence proves inherently unstable. The sanctified realm lies at the midpoint. While concealing our dark side from society may be necessary, we should never conceal it from ourselves. Augustine's proclamation in The City of God resonates here: to act is to sin. Creation and destruction are inseparable. Light cannot exist without darkness. Jung's profound insight asserts that the ego and shadow originate from the same source and perfectly balance each other. Embracing our shadow leads to an inner sanctum, unattainable through any other means. Striving for perfection is futile. Instead, we must seek wholeness by embracing our humanity, including our strengths and flaws. Failure to acknowledge our shadow leads to missed opportunities for growth and fulfillment. Honoring our shadow is essential, but projecting it onto others is detrimental. The shadow demands acknowledgement, whether through conscious assimilation or unconscious projection. Denying the dark side of our nature results in its accumulation, manifesting as psychological distress or societal unrest. The collective consequences of denying the shadow are evident in societal issues like war, economic instability, and racial intolerance. Embracing our wholeness, including our shadow, is imperative for societal harmony and individual well-being. The inclination to externalize our shadow onto others is a perilous aspect of the modern psyche, perpetuating division and conflict. The impact of projecting one's shadow onto others extends beyond negative repercussions for others. It also affects oneself detrimentally. Assimilating the shadow requires bringing it back into oneself, to the source where it originated and where it is essential for one's wholeness. Often, two individuals' shadows are pitted against each other, resulting in a futile clash driven solely by the unconscious. Responding to another's shadow without reacting is an act of extraordinary wisdom. In literature, Goethe's Faust provides a compelling illustration of the encounter between ego and shadow. Faust, a scholar grappling with existential despair, encounters his shadow, Mephistopheles, at his breaking point. Through their interaction, Faust transcends his lifelessness and discovers the capacity for passion, while Mephistopheles learns to love. Love serves as the apt descriptor for this synthesis of ego and shadow in our Western tradition. Understanding that we often resist acknowledging our noble traits, instead substituting them with shadow aspects, is challenging. People fear their capacity for nobility as much as their darkest aspects. The energy invested in our shadow is immense, and neglecting it leaves us feeling depleted and lethargic. Confronting one's shadow infuses us with vitality and stamina, enhancing our ability to tackle daily tasks. A practical example shared by Robert involves releasing pent-up energy before a lecture, revitalizing him for the task ahead. Parrots learn profanity more readily than common phrases because they sense the intensity behind our curses. Despite not understanding the word's meaning, even animals can sense the hidden power within our shadows. As one reaches middle age, the wearying back-and-forth journey between the two ends of the seesaw becomes tiresome. Surprisingly, the middle ground is not the dull compromise we anticipated, but a place of ecstasy and joy. Learning to harness the energy of the shadow correctly can pave the way for an entirely new phase of life. In a shadow ritual, one must select a left-hand aspect and give it expression in a manner that does not harm the right-hand personality. Sacrifice can take various forms, such as writing down shadow material and then burning the paper. Symbolic or ceremonial rituals hold as much significance as any event, provided they hold personal meaning. Healthy societies maintain a rich ceremonial life to symbolically address their shadow through practices like fasting, sacrifice, or sexual abstention. It's imperative to acknowledge the entirety of reality, destruction alongside creation, evil alongside redemption. Our preference for the light blinds us to this broader vision of wholeness. Paradox, the water of life, is essential in our modern world. The great myths offer guidance on this matter, reminding us that treasures often lie in unexpected places. Strangely, profound insights can emerge from the most neglected corners. We often go to great lengths to avoid confronting this painful paradox, yet in doing so, we confine ourselves to the futile experience of contradiction. Contradiction brings the crushing weight of meaninglessness. Suffering is bearable if it holds meaning, but meaninglessness is unbearable. However, paradox is fertile and transformative. It represents a profound acceptance of reality. Every human experience can be understood in terms of paradox: day in contrast to night, masculinity in relation to femininity, activity juxtaposed with rest. Transitioning from opposition, which breeds conflict, to paradox, which is inherently sacred, signifies a leap in consciousness. This leap guides us through the chaos of middle age and illuminates the remaining years of life. Winning and losing, indulgence and restraint, acquiring and giving, these are not opposites but essential aspects of the human condition. Each of us navigates this contradiction in our own way. So, what do we do with this seemingly unbearable contradiction? This question lies at the core of every neurotic dissociation and psychological struggle. Approaching the question incorrectly can lead to a state of neurotic paralysis, where one feels incapable of either action or stillness. Many find themselves in this state, experiencing intense suffering. Danish philosopher Kierkegaard captures this sentiment by illustrating the life of the aesthete, who pursues pleasure but is ultimately consumed by despair. He expresses this as a feeling of being unable to be bothered with anything, neither riding, walking, nor lying down. Kierkegaard suggests that paradox is the antidote to despair, found through taking a leap of faith towards God. Considering one mode of action as profane and another as sacred is a grave misuse of language, leading to much of the neurotic suffering in humanity. Religion serves to bridge and heal, reconciling the opposition that torments us. It guides us from a state of contradiction, where things oppose each other, to the realm of paradox, where we can simultaneously embrace contradictory notions with equal reverence. William Blake also emphasized the need to reconcile the light and dark aspects of the self, suggesting that we should seek form from heaven and energy from hell, and unite the two. Yet, many expend their life energy supporting the war of opposites within themselves, resulting in despair. In the miracle of paradox, winning and losing, having and not having, are both esteemed. Loyalty to paradox earns one the right to wholeness. Fanaticism often arises from adopting one opposite at the expense of the other, resulting in a brittle personality always convinced of being right. Paradox is deeply intertwined with the shadow, as true reconciliation cannot occur until one acknowledges and dignifies their own shadow. Owning one's shadow paves the way for spiritual experience, leading from conflict through paradox to revelation. We often find ourselves debating between disciplined tasks and indulgence, unsure of which path to choose. Yet, neither extreme is inherently holy, rather, it is within the paradox between them that the sacred resides. Being in a situation with no apparent way out or facing an unsolvable conflict marks the beginning of individuation or self-realization. In this state, the unconscious orchestrates a seemingly hopeless conflict to confront ego consciousness, forcing one to recognize that whatever action is taken seems to be wrong. This humbling experience invites us to transcend the ego and connect with something greater than ourselves. The mandala, symbolizing wholeness and the self, serves as a reminder of our unity with God and all living beings. In Tibetan tradition, a teacher may present a mandala to a student, who meditates on it for years before receiving further instruction. However, the mandorla, a concept rarely discussed, also holds significant healing power. It takes the form of an almond-shaped segment created when two circles overlap, symbolizing the convergence of opposites we have explored. It guides us in the art of reconciliation, often depicting Christ or the Virgin Mary at its center, representing the intersection of the divine and the human. Christ serves as the prototype for reconciling opposites, leading us beyond conflict and duality. When life becomes unbearable and efforts to navigate its contradictions falter, the mandorla offers guidance. Our healing emerges from the overlap of what we perceive as good and evil, light and dark. It is at this juncture where profound religious experiences unfold. While we may prefer stories of good triumphing over evil, the deeper truth lies in the transcendence of these dualities, where they merge into oneness. As we embrace our dual citizenship of heaven and earth, we realize the illusion of separate circles and the ultimate unity underlying existence. Creating a mandorla in our inner lives resonates far beyond, impacting the collective consciousness. By acknowledging our shadow and reducing shadow projection, we contribute less to the world's darkness, thereby paving the way for the mandorla, the pinnacle of inner wholeness. T.S. Eliot's The Four Quartets encapsulates this unity, proclaiming, "The fire and the rose are one," symbolizing the convergence of transformation and rebirth in a single entity.